Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Kathy Byles. I'm part of the 55 plus membership here at the Recreation Center, and I'm also a member of IODE. A few months ago, I asked Alicia if I could approach the Knitting Circle group to see if anyone would be interested in knitting for the charity. Alicia explained that it's not permitted to solicit anything from the Rec Center members, but if I wanted to hold a workshop to talk about the charity and its needs, we could set something up. So here I am, and over the next 30 minutes, I would like to introduce you to IODE, officially known as Imperial Order Daughters of the Empire. I'll provide a brief review of its 125-year history, talk about our commitment to assist Northern Indigenous communities, and look at the various programs we offer to these communities. So what is IODE? Well, it's a Canadian women's charitable organization who are inclusive, organized, dedicated, and enthusiastic. What does it do? We work to improve the quality of life for children, youth, and those in need through education support, community service, and citizenship programs. How? We organize fundraising projects, gather donations of useful items, and then distribute to those in need. And we have fun doing it. The Imperial Order Daughters of the Empire was established in 1990 by Margaret Polson Murray, who was anxious to help support the Canadian soldiers that fought with the British forces in Africa during the Boer War. She sent telegrams to the mayors of the capital cities in the new Dominion of Canada, requesting they call together prominent women in their communities to organize Daughters of the Empire societies. Soon, women in a number of provinces became interested, and in less than 2 years, chapters were formed in Quebec and Ontario, and soon after in other provinces. Women hastened to demonstrate their patriotism by forming local chapters. During the first quarter of the century, IODE grew, and during the First World War had thousands of members. Some of their activities included raising funds to help soldiers' families, initially those that served in the Boer War and then World War I. From 1904 to 1914, they provided funding for beds in sanatoriums for those with tuberculosis. They actually made the bedding for the beds and volunteered their time in the institutions. In 1912, they established a preventatorium, the first of its kind in North America, to treat children who had been exposed to but not yet contracted tuberculosis. In 1915, they created the first Tag Day in Canada. They sold paper roses to raise funds for various child welfare projects, mainly in hospitals. And in 1917, they joined in the relief efforts following the Halifax explosion. IODE was very active during World War I from 1914 to 18 and World War II, 1939 to 45. During the war years, across Canada, they raised more than $12 million to fund hospitals, hospital ships, and ambulances, to purchase fighter planes and a bomber, which they gifted to the government. They also prepared and sent overseas personal comforts for soldiers called ditty bags, comprised of soap, razors, socks, hats, and cigarettes. Immediately following each war, IODE established a memorial fund for scholarships, initially for the children of those killed and those permanently disabled. And in 1940, the scholarships were open to all PhD students across Canada, and they were made permanent. They continue to this day to honor our war heroes by awarding postgraduate scholarships to Canadian students seeking a higher education. IODE has donated more than $1 million to these funds. And in 2025, $55,000 was paid out to 3 individuals pursuing PhDs. One was for $25,000 and the other 2 were $15,000 each. It was during the years of World War I that IODE grew to a size too large to administer by one head office in Toronto. There were hundreds of individual chapters spread across Canada. So after the war, IODE established provincial chapters. IODE Ontario was established in 1920 with a president, executive officers, and board of directors, reporting to IODE Canada and overseeing 260 chapters in the province of Ontario. Today, there are 37 active chapters with more than 640 members in Ontario. At one point, there were chapters in each of Port Hope and Cobourg. The Colonel Arthur Williams chapter in Port Hope was established in 1914 and ran to 1962. The Cobourg chapter was established in 1914 and ran till 1934. For the remainder of my presentation, I focus on only a few of the projects undertaken by IODE. It would take hours to go through all the projects and initiatives of IODE nationally for the past 125 years. Each chapter is committed to servicing their local community. They decide, as a chapter, where to focus their fund drives and their energies. For example, a local hospital or school, a nursing home, children's or women's shelters. However, chapters also come together to pool their resources to support larger, broader projects or programs that are outside their small communities. Here are a few of the IODE projects. From the 1920s into the 1930s, IODE was focused on reducing infant and maternal mortality rate. They provided milk to undernourished school children. They continued to provide equipment to the preventatorium and sanatoriums, as well as volunteering at the institutions. From 1923 through to today, they've supported isolated northern communities by adopting schools and sending packages containing warm clothing, footwear, hygiene items, books, and school supplies. In 1927, IODE Rosedale chapter in Toronto funded a fully equipped dental railway car that was renovated for living quarters for a dentist and his wife to tour and serve in Northern Ontario. The Ontario government paid the dentist, CN provided the rail car, and IODE funds provided all the equipment. During the war years, IODE was extremely active. In June 1940, IODE raised $100,000 in 1 month to purchase a bomber. They set up a cigarette fund and sent 2.25 million cigarettes to soldiers. In 1943, they adopted 154 ships and sent parcels to the crew. They continued to send ditty bags. In 1943, Ontario alone sent 12,000 ditty bags to the soldiers. In 1944, IODE Ontario purchased 11.5 tons of yarn, and almost 124,000 articles were made and distributed. In 1945, over 20,000 articles were shipped to Europe to help with the war relief recovery. During the 1950s, they had the Korean War Project, which ran from 1951 to 1953. IODE provided a Willys cargo carrier, which is something like a Jeep, to transport goods and sometimes served as an ambulance. They sent hospital equipment, clothing, bedding, and knitted socks, as well as a TB machine and tons of milk powder. In 1954, Hurricane Hazel caused disastrous floods in the Holland Marsh. IODE established an emergency food depot, and the local chapter took many of the victims into their own homes. Members worked with other organizations and served approximately 3,000 meals a day for 3 weeks for the homeless and the men working on the dikes. They also raised almost $16,000 for flood relief. It was during the 50s that Greece suffered 2 serious earthquakes. IODE shipped more than 30 crates filled with quilts and new and used clothing to aid the victims. And throughout the 1950s, more than 165 cases of clothing and bedding were sent to England as part of the ongoing war relief. From the 1960s and 70s, we have the Toys for the North project, which was established in 1967, and it continues to today. A special fund to purchase and collect donated toys for remote northern communities at Christmas. In 1970 to 73, IODE raised funds to build and supply a community center in IODE-a, which is an isolated community on the south shores of James Bay. Phase 2 of the IODE-a project provided materials and courses in sewing, nutrition, child health care, and other homemaking skills. For more than a decade, IODE also supported the Ontario government's Services for Children with Mental and Emotional Disorders by providing equipment, volunteering their time in waiting rooms, and driving children to clinics. From the 1980s into 2000, we have 1980. IODE provided funds for a Brailleist program and a Braille machine for the CNIB. In 1982, over $12,000 was raised for hearing testing equipment for the Ontario Crippled Children's Centre. Footwear for Kids was a program set up in 1987 and continues to today. A special fund for the purchase of boots, running shoes, socks to be sent to remote northern communities. In 1997, the Children's Cancer Camp Fund was established and raised $60,000 over 3 years to build a winterized camper cabin at Camp Trillium on Rainbow Lake. And from 1998 to 2001, IODE ran the You Can't Beat a Kid campaign to alleviate child abuse and neglect. And it was through the sale of $2 buttons that were imprinted with the slogan, You Can't Beat a Kid, as well as chapter donations, that nearly $26,000 was raised. So we moved into the 21st century. IODE was celebrating its 100-year anniversary. And from 2000 to 2015, the Concerned for Children Fund raised $402,000 and paid for genetic counseling initiatives. As well, it provided 3 two-year fellowships for the study of genetics that were valued at $50,000 each. They provided funding for genetic research centers and projects at London's University Hospital and the North York Hospital, as well as genetic counseling clinics established in 6 northern communities. From 1997 to 2009, IODE supported the Rainbow Lake Cancer Camp, raising $90,000 to purchase swing sets, a sailboat, a teepee, and 1,300 camper t-shirts. In 2006, the Carla Can Sing project provided backpacks containing a doll with removable hair, CD, and coloring book to help children to deal with cancer. In 2018, Project Fun raised funds for playground equipment for the Good Shepherd Family Center in Hamilton. And in 2019, Play It Forward raised funds for sports equipment for remote northern communities. I hope you found this quick, condensed 125-year history of IODE interesting. We're now at the part where I cover the main reason for me joining IODE. When I retired, I started looking for ways to do something to assist and support Indigenous children, especially those in isolated communities. 2 years ago, I was introduced to IODE and discovered that IODE Ontario has been assisting Northern Indigenous communities for 87 years. They have been providing boxes of warm clothing and personal hygiene items to community centers, nursing clinics, women's shelters, and schools in the far north. Many of the items are made and donated by members and friends of IODE across the province. Our chapters also raise funds to purchase shoes, boots, snowsuits, socks, underwear, and personal hygiene items. And in November, books, toys, games, and candy are shipped north. For some, these are their only Christmas presents. There are 15 isolated communities that IODE assists. There are no roads leading to these communities in Northern Ontario and no stores for buying merchandise. They live off the land, and everything else they may need must be flown in by small planes or, during the winter months, trucked in over the ice highways. As you can imagine, goods shipped to these communities are very expensive due to the shipping costs. The populations of these communities range from 88 to 5,600. There are 4 with less than 500 people, 5 with 500 to 1,000 people, and 6 of them are over 1,000, up to 5,600. IODE works with the community nursing station or medical center, or through our adopted school program, and they distribute the supplies to where they are needed most. In Attawapiskat and Moosonee, we supply a nursing station and have adopted schools. They are 2 of the larger communities. The IODE Adopted Schools classroom program was initiated in 1923 to improve literacy among the children in remote Ontario communities. The focus of the program is to augment educational programs in the schools by supplying crafts, library books, magazines, computer programs, video games, and other educational materials. Our aim is to provide some measure of equal opportunity for children in remote areas. We contact the teacher before the start of the school year to ask what she or he and the children will need in the coming year. My chapter has adopted a grade 1 class. We usually provide each child with a backpack, water bottle, crayons, pencils, stickers, and sometimes we hear of the need of something different or special. This year it was indoor shoes, or sometimes it may be headphones or other equipment needs. And even if there is no ask from the teacher, we always make sure a package of teaching materials are sent to the teacher. One of the most enjoyable parts of adopting a classroom is the sending and receiving of pen pal letters with the children. We try to get a very brief letter off to each child in October and send a Christmas greeting in December. By January or February, the children usually write us a letter, which we try to respond to before the end of the school year. This blurry picture is of our grade 1 class. I couldn't show you a focused picture as we do not have permission to show the faces of these children, but I think you can see how happy they are for what they had received. Our biggest challenge with servicing isolated communities is getting our packages to them. Canada Post can be very expensive and is not always reliable. In recent years, we have been fortunate in being able to partner with the OPP. Prior to the pandemic, the OPP would come to us to load up their trucks. Now, more often, we go to them by driving up to northern communities. For the past couple of years, a couple of members have loaded dozens of boxes in the back of their vehicles when driving north to visit family. A local OPP officer then takes the boxes and delivers them to the Anishinaabe Police Services in Cochrane, Ontario. Cochrane is about a 10-hour drive from Port Hope. The Anishinaabe Police is responsible for providing policing to the First Nation communities spanning all of Northern Ontario. They have an aircraft for getting into the most remote areas and are pleased to assist us when possible. Thank you for coming out today. I hope you will be leaving with a better understanding of what IODE is and how a wonderful organization of women is working to make Canada better. Does anyone have any questions for me? I'm happy to stick around after to talk to anyone. I see we have time and wonder if any of you have ever heard of Shannon Couche-Dachon, a teenage activist and Canadian hero from IODE-a. When I first joined IODE, I did some research into IODE-a, the community my chapter supports. I discovered an amazing story and was shocked that I hadn't heard it before. Shannon Couche-Dachon is sometimes compared to Terry Fox. There is a bronze statue of her in New Liskeard, Ontario. At the age of 14, Shannon was an activist and a leader of a movement called Students Helping Students. In 2008, they launched a nationwide campaign to have a new school built in IODE-a, and this became the largest youth-led rights movement in Canadian history. Shannon was born July 12, 1994 in IODE-a, which is in Northern Ontario on the south shores of James Bay. In 2000, just when she was about to begin kindergarten, the local school was closed due to toxic contamination of the lands it was on. 400 children were put in portables that lacked proper insulation and ventilation. By 2008, when Shannon was in grade 8, the portables were falling apart with black mold and mice infestation. Children as young as grades 4 and 5 were dropping out of school because they couldn't stand the conditions they were in. The community leaders frequently asked the government about the new school that was promised. The minister responsible for Indigenous schools would respond that there are no funds to build the school. When that response came in early 2008, Shannon's grade 8 class decided to take action. They had plans for a class trip to Toronto and Niagara Falls at the end of the school year, which they canceled, and booked a smaller group to go to Ottawa to speak directly with the minister. In May 2008, the minister met with the students in his office. He listened to their presentations and saw all of their pictures, but then told them there are no funds and no intention to build the promised school. As you can imagine, the children were extremely upset, and Shannon, in her anger, told the minister that's not good enough. On the steps of Parliament, the students saw a media scrum where the media were trying to interview different politicians. Shannon decided to approach the media and began to tell their story. They showed them the presentation, which they had shown the minister, and the pictures showing the deplorable conditions of those portables. The media listened, and many gave the students advice and encouragement to go back and fight by telling the world how the government continues to break its promises to their people. There were a number of articles written on that day in Ottawa. Upon their return to IODE-a, Shannon organized the students to write letters of protest and raise awareness of the shoddy conditions and standards in First Nation schools. They used social media to post pictures of the conditions. They wrote to schools and school organizations across Canada, including a number of the Canadian universities. Soon, students across Canada joined the cause, and Students Helping Students was launched. The young organization got a great deal of press coverage in Canada and abroad. And by the end of the year, Shannon was nominated for the International Children's Peace Prize, which is awarded to a child who has worked to improve children's lives around the world. In 2009, very early in the new year, the federal government finally commits in Parliament to follow through on its promise to build a new school in Attawapiskat. At that time, in 2009, Shannon has left Attawapiskat to attend high school in New Liskeard. Tragically, Shannon was killed in a car accident just before her 16th birthday in 2010. That's when Shannon's dream was launched, and it continues to today, providing scholarships for Indigenous children. On June 22nd, 2012, the day Shannon would have graduated high school, construction started on a new school. And on September 8th, 2014, Attawapiskat Elementary School was opened. Thank you.